My name is Colleen Hanlon, and it's so good to see so many faces that I know. Hamed did such a great job sort of thanking everybody that's contributed to it, so I just want to take a moment to thank Hamed for bringing us all together. I think this is probably one of the most professionally diverse crowds I've seen in a room, right? Like, it's actually pretty amazing to have people from all of these different aspects of science together. So hope we learn a lot today. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Colleen Hanlon. I was in academics for a very long time, and I did a lot of basic science work and some clinical trials, and I know all these guys a lot. And then about 2 years ago, I decided that I love science, of course, but I could only do so much within my lab, right? And I love the lab, I love the students, I love the curation of ideas, but I also love TMS. And I really wanted to see TMS for addiction like get out there. And my dear friend Bumi Zengin, who helped sort of invent some of the first H-coils, eventually launched a company. They were doing it. In 2020, they got the first FDA clearance for smoking cessation. And I thought to myself, man, that's amazing. Imagine how that would feel, taking an idea from an idea all the way up through the fact that there's a clinic down the street that's actually using your device to help people. Like, that's a cool thing. So it's a fun ride. It's nice to sort of see different aspects of it. And so since I've been now I work for BrainsWay as the VP of Medical Affairs, and that's a whole other thing. Just so you know, I run clinical trials, I read literature, I do lots of teaching, I sit in lots of boring meetings, just like lots of you in this audience. So it's really not that different in many ways from what we all do. It's just kind of looking at it through a different lens. And so being in this side and kind of learning a lot of the things, we only have a few minutes, so I just have one slide. And these are some things that I've sort of learned and what I would tell myself 5 years ago, right? So if I was sitting in this audience, honestly, and I listened to all these great talks that we heard, I would have been overwhelmed. I would be like, that's just wonderful, but like, I just have so much going on. I just don't even know how to think about commercialization strategies. But what I think they've shown you here, and I've actually learned today, is that actually even NIH has a lot of stuff in place to try to help you. And it was great to hear from the FDA that they're there. So that's great. So this is what I would tell myself. The first thing to ask yourself is, when you submit a grant or you try to run a study, why are you doing it? So is your grant just about discovery? So trying to understand a system. Lots of us in the room are neuroscience based. So are you just trying to understand the brain and a brain process? If so, you should probably talk to John Fedota. Or are you really trying to develop a technology or develop a behavioral intervention where you really are going to start the hard work to do a preliminary clinical trial, which ultimately will go out to, potentially production? Or are you really just doing the grant for job security? I put this here actually a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but everyone laughs because you kind of know it's a little bit true, right? So you all need to pay the bills. We all need to sort of run staff. And so that is a real thing. That is in some ways why it's nice to be in a position where your salary doesn't have to be dependent, isn't 100% soft money, just if there's any chairs out there, because you have the ability to think. So sometimes we have to do work just because it's the work, right? But then hopefully sometimes we get to do the work that we really want to do to really see it move ahead. There we go. So really what I'm talking about here is number 2. So if you're writing grants and you're doing trials for therapeutic development. Okay. So think about that when you go in. Talk to Will, talk to your program officers early, and talk to the FDA. So talk to NIH if you're NIH bent, or if you get DoD funding or NSF funding, talk to the program officers there, and then talk to the FDA. It's really important if you need to get an IDE, so an investigational device exemption. You might not even know what those words mean yet. But at some point you might need to know what they are, and there really are people here to help you kind of learn what that is. And then the other person to talk to is, who's going to commercialize your device, right? You might do it. You might have somebody in your lab who wants to write an SBIR grant and start a small business and launch it. maybe. Or maybe you live in Silicon Valley and you just are an entrepreneur and you're going to drop out of school and just change your whole life. Or maybe you want to just do something more traditional and sort of market your idea to Johnson & Johnson or Medtronic or Brainsway and kind of go that way. But if you have an industry partner in mind, talk to them early. Go up to them at these conferences. I used to avoid all the booths like forever. I've walked past the Soterix booth 1,000 times, wanting to talk to them, but thinking I didn't really know what to say, right? And so now that I'm kind of the person that stands behind the booth sometimes, yeah, come talk to people. They're really normal people, actually, and they have a lot of the same questions that you have, actually. But when you talk to the FDA, kind of, as we heard just a second ago, this is what you need to ask. You need to engage in a conversation like we just heard. What are the established endpoints? In substance use disorder and alcohol use disorder, it's almost always use, right? So it's almost always use. It's not that we can't change the world and make them think that craving is a strong biomarker, but right now, it's use. So how much to use. In some ways, I think that's actually makes us kind of more rigorous than the depression field, because we can just look, we can take urines, we can take blood samples. But because we can do that, that's kind of this level of evidence we have to provide. We've been talking about Brainsway's done trials in smoking. We've talked to the FDA about a variety of things like alcohol for a long time. And it's interesting, for some drugs like cocaine use disorder, because there hasn't been anything approved in a long time, they don't really have a lot of, it's not obvious what the endpoint should be. For alcohol use disorder, there hasn't been anything approved in an extremely long time. And so it's not clear that the older endpoints are going to be the same ones that are relevant here. So you have to kind of engage them. And follow-up is very long. So when I was writing grants, if I could show an effect and monitor it for a month and I had the budget to do that, I felt really good. 3 months, I felt amazing. But budgets are small and you're just one lab, it's a lot of work to do that. But in reality, if you're going to develop a treatment, you need to have evidence to show that your treatment is durable. And usually right now for alcohol, they want 6 months, so 6 months follow-ups. Imagine doing that on an R21, right? It's very, very, very hard. So you need to kind of work together, and you can push the needle. So they pushed the needle with smoking, and they looked at short-term smoking cessation. You can push the needle with different devices. You just have to engage with the FDA. And again, that's to kind of mention, think about the long game. So you might be doing this grant just for job security, but you might also be doing it because you legitimately really want to see this move forward. And if your long game is to either become a bajillionaire by selling your idea to Elon Musk, or if it's just to get tenure and have a cool idea and lead a conference like Hamed or something, just think about what you want. And if you are going to market this idea to a company, you want to think about the population. A business is a business, right? They want to have a lot of impact. One of the reasons, unfortunately, we don't invest in things like vaccines is because it's one and done, right? Drugs that are really common are going to be higher interest targets than drug use that's sort of a niche field. Unfortunately, it's just the way that it is. But there are mechanisms to help sort of underserved populations, and actually the environment now really favors some of those. So again, think really carefully about that when you start to design a study. Will it be scalable? So it cut me off. That's good. Actually, that's good. So just one sentence. So then will it be scalable? So are you going to be able to take this and easily disseminate it out to everybody for a home use perspective, perhaps? Or you're going to be able to put it in a rural community that doesn't have access to fancy equipment and fancy diagnostics. So think about that too, because legitimately that's going to be what sort of makes the difference between something that just is in your lab and pays the bills and then something that legitimately helps people. That's it.